Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Purposeful Conversations with me, Emmy, here in the PAMI Code Facebook community. And in our group, I know that so many of us, well, actually, the reason why you are here in this community is that you want to live a purposeful life. And I know that so many of us are living a life of purpose, and so many are leaders, leading your communities, leading your families, your organizations, and so on. And sometimes in our position of leadership, sometimes we forget that we are human and that we hide our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, and we sometimes wear a mask, to show others that we are the strong leader. But I think we should never forget that we have our vulnerabilities as well, and we need to be able to show our humanity to the people we serve. So for today, I've invited our very special guest. She's going to talk about vulnerable leadership, and she's a speaker, podcaster, and transformation happiness mentor. I'm really interested with what she has to say about this. So let's all welcome Taylor Proctor. Hi, Taylor.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I have to say, this thing about vulnerable leadership, it's not something that we talk a lot about, that often, because when it comes to being a leader, most people have this vision of being very strong, being, they know what they need to do. They have the strategies in place, and, they have to lead with so much vision and so much courage. But sometimes we forget that these leaders are also human. So I'd be really interested with what you have to say about this. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this field, and yeah, what are you all about?
Sure. So, as you said in your beautiful intro, I am a transformational happiness mentor. So, I help people, if we're asking how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10, I help people that are in that 2 to 3 range get up to a 7, 8, or 9 through discovering their daily happiness habits. And most of the people that I work with are high performance individuals who have met what I deem as the societal checklist, right? So they're people like you and me who have maybe taken the advice of the world and said, yes, I will be happy when I'm successful,
Mm.
and somehow that equals happiness. And to get there, all I have to do is get a degree, have a wonderful spouse, start a lovely family, have the dream house, and then have that corporate corner office or my own successful business. And once I get those, then I'll be happy. And in truth, that usually doesn't happen that way. And so what I do is I help these individuals that are struggling with, I have all this stuff that says I'm supposed to be happy and I'm not. And I help them be able to maintain and keep all those wonderful things that they've worked so hard for, but also establish what their individual and unique happiness means to them. And it's truly the honor and joy and passion of my life to be able to help people do that through my company. But then also there's a part of that that takes vulnerable leadership. And in
Yeah.
conjunction with being a happiness mentor, I also have been a global marketing director, leading global teams, doing work in 5 different languages across multiple locations across the world. And so leading teams through vulnerable leadership is something that I am quite passionate about, not only in helping my clients and having that vulnerable leadership with them, also helping them figure that out for themselves, but then also within the corporate space, I've had the opportunity to really explore what vulnerable leadership is and how it can help.
I love it. And I'm guessing this might be also linked to your personal background. I don't know. Is there something in your personal life and something that prompted you to pursue something like this? Did you have to experience a bit of pain yourself to pursue this particular path?
Yes, and I actually, it's so funny because I say this and I mean it so wholeheartedly, and usually people are like, wait, what? But I was the angriest person I have ever met. I was so mad all the time, and I was just full of this bitterness and full of resentment for the world. And I wasn't always that way. I was a happy child, a happy teenager, and then as I hit adulthood, life knocked me down, as it can do. And I just found myself getting into these habits of anger instead of feeling what I was feeling and exploring it. And so after a very long period of time of trying to like figure out how I could not be angry, how I could really step into my best self, I realized that I had this expectation around happiness, that it was inherent. And since it wasn't naturally coming to me and I was just naturally angry, that I was broken or defective. And so if I was going to put myself on that scale of happiness, I was in that 2 or 3 range where I had hope, but I
Mm,
also was like, oh, something's wrong with me. And
yeah. You
I
needed to make
started,
that shift because I suppose you're probably one of those high achievers as well. From the outside, people would see you as someone who's successful, someone who's supposed to be happy and content because you are achieving all of these things that society expects a successful person will have. And yet you still feel angry. You still
yeah,
feel empty, and there's something missing. And in terms of the happiness scale, as you've said, scale of 2 to 3, maybe from the outside perspective, people would be wondering like, why? Why is she still unhappy? And that actually agitates you a little bit more. So what made you want to shift? And when you made that shift, is that why you're now helping others to improve their happiness as well?
yeah. So what happened to make that shift was I realized that expectation was false. And once I realized the expectation of happiness being inherent was actually false and that I could work on it, it could be a learned skill, I started doing the work. And over a series of like 5 years, really turned my life around, my emotions around, my relationships around. Everything transitioned and transformed to being about happiness and joy. And I fully embrace it now. And I still get angry. I'm a human. 50% of the time we have some negative emotions, but now I know how to deal with those.
Mm,
And I realized when I was in that space and I was like, oh, I finally feel like I know what I'm doing. I have the right happiness habits in place. I'm happy every single day. And I'm reaching these like peak levels of performance, right? Here, when I'm angry, I'm here. But then as I'm getting
yeah.
happier and I'm investing in myself, like peak performance, elite mindset, all of that comes into play as well. And I realized there's got to be other people that were like me. I think there's a lot of people that are like me that are consumed in anger because it's really hiding fear and vulnerability, and we don't want that, so we try to cover our vulnerability with anger. And there's a lot of us out there that want something more, and we want to feel peace, and we want to settle down the war that was within us. Right, for me, I was at war with fear and vulnerability and what I defined as weakness and scarcity, and then trying to protect that with anger. And there was no room on that teeter totter for happiness until I was able to acknowledge my emotions there. And so I thought, this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with and have been where
Mm.
I have been. And I would love to help them accelerate my journey and find it for themselves and their own unique happiness.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's really important that we are first of all aware of where we are, to have that clarity, to recognize that okay, this is not good. To actually embrace that and make a conscious decision to shift things, to be clear about where you want to be if you are at the current level of 2 or 3 in terms of the happiness, and embrace that vulnerability as well, as you've said. When you make that conscious intention to actually improve, be aware of where you are and where you want to be, I think that's a good step forward to actually improving your happiness. Because for some people, they know that something is not quite right, but they're not sure why. They couldn't really put their finger on it, and they don't know where they want to go because they actually don't know where they are, if that makes any sense. But
Totally.
when you actually identify where you are and where you want to be, having that clarity, having that awareness, it's actually a really good first step. But anyway, Taylor, you did mention this thing about vulnerability, and with me talking about awareness as well, could you tell us a little bit about what does vulnerability mean, and why do so many of us try to hide our vulnerabilities?
Yeah. So my opinion of vulnerability is showing your true self to the right people, right? You don't want to be vulnerable for vulnerability's sake, but you can be vulnerable and trusting to the right individuals. But also, vulnerability, at least specifically for me, is that awareness piece. It's an understanding and willingness to go deeper than surface level and understand what's happening and what's going on. And also, it's a way of embracing the fear that can come with making mistakes or being afraid of making mistakes. So when we look at leadership specific for vulnerability, you had said, like, we all feel like it's got to be this tough, strong, like, you can't mess with me. I have the strategies in place. We know everything. Like, I have the vision. Let's go. And all of that is important, especially having the vision and the strategy in place and leading your teams. But communication with vulnerable leadership is everything. And a lot of that can lean into, like, if I make a mistake, or let's say I don't know the answer to something, because inherently we all feel like as soon as we're leaders, we have to have all the answers. We have to know what's going on. And what that does is that actually limits your team from asking questions and building trust. Because if they feel like you have all the answers and you are fearless and unafraid, that doesn't give them any room for them to make mistakes or to ask questions, because they don't have all the answers. And it doesn't allow them to thrive and grow and collaborate and communicate as a team. So as a leader, stepping into vulnerable leadership and embracing that, like, hey, I don't know everything, but let's collaborate, let's work together on this, is huge, because it grows you and your team to these entirely new levels that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't had that baseline knowledge of, like, okay, right now I don't know the answer to this, and I really just want to say, like, well, figure it out. Or I want to be kind of this, for me, template anger. I want to be angry that we don't have this answer and just kind of go into a huff and puff, versus taking that breath, understanding, okay, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? I'm feeling a little bit upset because I'm trying to protect myself because I don't know the answer and I don't want to be perceived as a weak leader. But the truth is you're not a weak leader by raising your hand and saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to this, but we will figure it out, and we will figure it out together as a team.
I think that's a really good point. The only thing that's going in my mind right now is that for so many organizations, for example, or those who are leading projects, sometimes they get into the thick of whatever it is that they are doing, that they actually haven't got the time to reflect on what they are feeling. They actually don't have the time to ask themselves why they are feeling this way, not even recognizing that they don't have the, the answers to all the questions. So let's try to dissect this a little bit.
Yeah.
When it comes to vulnerable leadership, what are the characteristics of that, and what are the benefits of, um shall we say, embracing this, or at least taking vulnerable leadership into consideration as well? Is that a leadership style? Is that a principle? What exactly is it?
Yeah, I think I can answer a lot of those questions through a story. So I have a team member, and they came to me and were like, I'm feeling a little stressed out about stuff that's going on. And fair enough, right? We're in our one-on-one sync. They're stressed about all that's happening in the world, but they're also stressed in the workplace. But they couldn't pinpoint it. And so in vulnerable leadership, part of that is empathetic listening and understanding, right? And going, okay. And instead of being like, well, you're going to figure it out, like, I've got too many other things on my plate, let's just go. It's defined, in my opinion, vulnerable leadership is also deeply rooted in servant leadership. The thought here being that you are not successful unless your team is successful. So had this team member come, say they're stressed out, they don't really know why. So in a vulnerable leadership position, I can provide them the permission to take those breaks during the busy times. Thought here being like, okay, what I want you to do is actionable. Take 5 minutes, put in your calendar 3 times a day. 1 at 10, 1 at noon, 1 at 3. And what I want you to do is when that calendar alarm goes off, I want you to take a break and just take a second, kind of sit back for a minute and breathe. And then I want you to ask yourself, what am I feeling and why? So small step there. And I said, just write it down. You don't have to tell me the answers in our next one-on-one. I just want you to have that conscious awareness and be aware that you have permission to feel that way. As in embracing vulnerable leadership, that's a vulnerability piece on behalf of my team member.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need you to know you have the permission to feel how you feel and to ask why. And then together in the workplace, we can come together with solutions to solve that. So
That's
what
good.
ended
So
up
it's still action oriented, isn't it?
Oh,
That
yes.
you're not actually acting like their therapist, or
No.
you're not even trying to solve the problem for them, but you're giving them the space to actually figure out how they are feeling, giving them the space to find clarity and find the solution without you just throwing them away and say you have to figure it out yourself.
Right. And for a lot of us in leadership, I've been in a leadership position when I was younger that I did not embrace vulnerable leadership. And I've had similar discussions where I was like, well, that sucks. The job is stressful. Like, we're all stressed. We've just got to kind of work through it, figure it out. We'll calm down. And the reason that that behavior comes forward from non-vulnerable leaders is because we're scared. Like, yeah, actually, we're stressed too. And I don't know how to solve it for me. So I don't know how to solve it for you. And I can't help you because I just have way too many other things going on. So that's why I also say it's rooted in servant leadership, because you have to be there to serve your team and be in the right mindset for that.
Yeah.
But the really nice thing about vulnerable leadership in terms of like the benefits and what it can produce is it does produce more trust on the team. Now this individual feels like they can take the breaks that they need, take care of themselves, have a little bit better of a balance, understand themselves better in the workplace, and then they work and perform at higher levels. But not only that, so that happened a couple weeks later, we were talking again, and I'm like, hey, so how's that going? They're like, actually, I really discovered what it was that was stressing me out. It was, in fact, this group team chat that we have, and it's going off all the time. And so I feel like I need to be contributing there, but it's taking me away and distracting me from my work. And I need to get my work done and hit my numbers and all these other components. And it's stressing me out. I was like, awesome. That's really good to know. Let's work out a game plan on how we could maybe put an agenda to that chat. So we have block out times where maybe we aren't asking questions of each other in that chat, and we have block out times where we do, and so we don't lose the collaboration and communication as a team, but we also can set you up for success. And I would bet that if you're feeling this way and you had a hard time identifying it until we gave you permission, and not me giving permission, but them giving permission to themselves as well, to figure it out, I bet other people are feeling this way too. So we implemented that new system as a test, and it has transformed the way my team communicates at whole new levels. But so many team members in their one-on-ones were like, I love the new chat program, because I didn't realize how stressed out I was feeling until we put that program in place. And now I like feel so much more relaxed. I'm so much more productive. And all of that happened because one person felt they trusted enough to say, I'm stressed out. So they were vulnerable themselves, leading themselves with vulnerability, and knew that I could be a trusted source because I had been vulnerable with them in the past. And together we figured it out. We worked out a solution, and it actually benefited the entirety of the team. So vulnerable leadership in terms of results, kind of the sky's the limit. It sets a team and a leader so much up for success that really it's whatever you want it to be. And that's
Yeah.
such an amazing concept that I think, especially in corporate America, we're starting to shift to, but it's not something that's ever been fully embraced, because it means actually trusting yourself and trusting your team and figuring it out, even if you don't know the answers.
I love it. I mean, so it's not just giving the answers all the time, because I think on one side of the spectrum, you have a problem, and then the leaders just say, "Ah, I'm stressed out, just figure it's your job, figure it out. We're all trying to firefight here or whatever, just letting them do whatever they want." But on the other side of the spectrum, there's this leader who will try to solve everything, and the boundaries are crossed, that you become their therapist, or you try to solve their marital issues. It's like it's not really your problem, but boundaries are being crossed. And as a result, for these people who are too giving, and I have to say, for the members in our community, so many of us are on that side of the spectrum, that they give so much, that they try to solve everything, that even it actually surpasses boundaries. Boundaries are being crossed. Personal and professional boundaries are being crossed. Eventually, the one who gives too much becomes burned out as a result. But the solution that you are sharing with us right now, it's not that, as you've said, you don't really have the answer to everything, but by being vulnerable and giving them the space to actually find clarity, and just to breathe, and to find that the answer themselves, you are empowering your team members without you being the source of all knowledge, but you being a source of maybe encouragement, giving them the space to be vulnerable, and everybody to be on the same boat. What do you have to say about that, in terms of finding the balance, in terms of being a vulnerable in terms of practicing vulnerable leadership, and as you've said, it has parallels with servant leadership, without going to the extreme where you're actually crossing personal and professional boundaries to the extent that you're getting burnt out as a result of that.
Totally. I think there's a couple of components here. First, you're not being a vulnerable leader if you're not raising your hand and being vulnerable with your team and saying, I'm overwhelmed right now, or whatever that may be, right? Because it's relatable. If you're overwhelmed, it trickles down, your team's overwhelmed. And sometimes it takes an acknowledgement of that for everybody to kind of get back on track and get recentered and back within the boundaries. And if you are trying to solve everything for your team members, you're not being vulnerable with yourself in the sense of understanding what you need, right? So you're still in that space of, I'm trying to help everybody, and help is great, but you're not understanding that you're not helping them grow by trying to solve all their problems. But also, you're not growing because you do feel like you have to have all the answers, and you don't have to have the answers for marital problems and all those other things. And in fact, you can say, I'm so sorry you're going through that. That's something that I think we can definitely keep an eye on if it's impacting and affecting your work. But we have programs in place. If it's a corporate job, we have programs in place through HR where there's therapy and counseling and things like that, and people who are better equipped to handle this. But as far as work stuff goes, like, I appreciate you telling me. I think we can keep an eye on it. I definitely want to give you the space to be able to work through whatever it is that you're going through, but let's come back on track. And I know that that's hard, but that also takes a sense of, what do you need, and being vulnerable with yourself and opening those doors of like, okay, am I a marriage counselor? No, I'm not. But I can understand how something happening in a marriage can impact your work and productivity. And so here's how we can provide grace for you to work through that while also still having that professional boundary. And I think too, there's this understanding that if you feel like you have to solve everything, you're not helping your team learn and grow to be their best selves. And I look at vulnerable leadership, seriously, this is like one of the core components of it. Who would I want as a boss? Who is the best boss that I have ever had times 10? And that's the kind of leader that I want to be. And those are always the leaders who can keep you on track and on task, provide you the space that you need, and allow themselves to say, hey, I don't know, but let's figure it out together, versus having all the answers and trying to steamroll over a team. Anytime that I have thrived in a professional space, it's when I've had a leader who has also trusted me and allowed me to take the steps, allowed me to maybe make some mistakes along the way and learn and grow from them. So one of my core foundations of vulnerable leadership is asking myself, what type of leader do I want to be? And I have this goal, which I will never know if it's actually come true, because I'm sure it's one of those things where you don't really ask
by
people.
times 10.
Yeah, but there is this concept in my mind that any person that I have a leadership responsibility to, so whether that's a corporate team that I have led in the past, or that's my own clients, or even listeners to my podcast, right? I'm in a leadership responsibility to them. And so I'm going to come at my best. And part of my best is being vulnerable and relatable and supportive and trusting. And so I try to lean into that. And I'm sure I will never hear, oh, you're the best boss I've ever had. But that's really what I strive for, the best leader that I can possibly be.
I love it. And I have to say, I love the point that you made about looking up to role models, looking for sources of inspiration of what kind of leader you want to be, and just to have to imagine that and to embody that in your own practice. I think, for me, I've been in so many different positions as a project leader, as a teacher, as a mentor, and to also be supervised by really good leaders who are quite nurturing and supportive, but still have a direction in terms of managing projects, and also those who are a little bit crappy. I had my fair share of both good leadership and not so good leadership. And I have to say that the ones that I really look up to, the role models that I've worked with, are those who are quite nurturing, that they can be also vulnerable, but at the same time they still maintain that credibility, and they still maintain that vision for the team, that even if things are actually difficult, they recognize that things are challenging, but they have this can-do attitude, and they will try to find ways to rally the team together, recognizing that it is not easy, that we are human. I remember one of my favorite team leaders. We Ironically, we were writing a report on obesity, and we were I think it was already 8 or 9 in the evening, and she was saying, I'm actually getting a little bit tired and hungry. Would you like to order pizza? Let's have pizza together. You're just having that, let's have a break. Let's have a, let's just relax for a little bit. Okay, it is a project on obesity. We're writing up a report on obesity, but, just to have a bit of chill time, have a bit of pizza, and, we can power through and finish the report on time. So, yeah, you can see the human side, but also the professional side. There's a balance to it, and I absolutely love leaders who are like that.
Well, and I think too, like as a leader, if I am having an issue, I don't have to tell my team the exact thing that's an issue in my personal life. I can say, hey guys, I'm going through something right now. So if I'm a little slow to respond, or I have to rearrange some meetings, I'm so sorry. I will get to you when I can. I just have some things happening in my life right now. You can say that. And that's vulnerable in its own sense, because you're not trying to balance the thing that is happening and your email communications and your meetings. You're preparing your team, you're setting the expectations, and they're going to be like, oh my
Okay.
gosh, is everything okay? Do you need anything? And I can just be like, nope, I just really appreciate your patience and your understanding and your consideration as I'm trying to work out some stuff over here. I don't have to say, oh, this happened and this happened and this happened. I don't have to be vulnerable to that extent, but I also don't have to pretend that everything is okay in my personal life and it's not impacting my work life, because it can. And just
Mm.
even setting those small boundaries where you're not crossing into like a sob story to your whole team, but you're also not up on this other piece where it's like, there's a wall here, I am immovable and I'm stressed out, but you will never see it, because guess what? Everybody sees it and feels it. Even in COVID times, we're all working remotely, it comes across. People can feel it. And so just giving yourself that space and saying, hey, I'm going through some stuff, setting the expectations, that in its own right is vulnerable leadership.
Yeah, I love it. And I think there's a bit of a fine line that you need to be
Yeah.
to be aware of, because yeah, there's the danger of, you, yes, be vulnerable. It's like you're like a sob story, and you treat your staff like, they are your therapist or your best friends. But I think when it comes to vulnerable leadership, it's just that recognition that, you don't have to be okay all the time, but just setting those expectations, but still getting on with what you have to do, to a certain extent that you are able to deliver as humanly possible. If that makes any sense, is that how it works?
Yeah, because you're not throwing away like all your expectations and all of your responsibilities because you have something going on. You're just saying, hey, kind of going through something right now, and resetting the expectations so you can get back on track once you've worked through that issue. It's not, you're right on, it's not the sob story of like, this and this happened and I don't know what to do, and you guys, I just keep on doing your good work, but I'm not going to be online. Like, it's not like that.
Mm,
And if it is, then it's probably time to actually call into work and set the expectation of, I need to have a personal day, and that encourages your team to take personal days. I really
yeah.
think a lot of vulnerable leadership leans in on example. You set the tone for your teams. And I think you also set the tone for yourself. How are you going to lead yourself? Because if we look at self leadership as a foundational for outer leadership, self leadership is not beating the crap out of yourself because you made a mistake. Self leadership is, okay, that was really rough. I feel kind of torn down right now. I'm going to give myself an hour or two or a day and kind of get my feet back underneath me. And then I'm going to look at what I've learned from this, how I've grown, and I'm going to keep on moving forward. And that's self leadership. And then you can definitely apply that to your team when they're making mistakes, or even setting that time frame of like, I need a little bit of time to get this project done. I'm not a magician leader where I have everything completely under control and I just wave my magic wand and a huge project is finished. Sometimes you have to be like, I have to cancel our one-on-ones because I have a big project. But
Hmm.
by saying that, instead of just canceling the one-on-ones or trying to power through and working till 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 at night trying to finish it, which you're also setting your team up to do, which then there's poor work-life balance, poor performance, poor productivity, etc. So it all kind of relates and ripples out from how you treat yourself. And if you can lead yourself with vulnerability and grace while still maintaining high expectations, because again, high drive individual here, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I'm having a self-care month.
Oh
Like that
no.
doesn't work, right? Does not work. But if you can take care of yourself and treat yourself with vulnerable leadership and apply these principles to you and how you lead your own life, it will definitely ripple out to how you can lead your teams.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Taylor. That was a really interesting, insightful discussion on vulnerable leadership. If there is any last, final message that you want to share with our audience, especially for those who want to learn more about vulnerable leadership, what do you have to say to them?
Sure. I think one of the easiest, I'm going to say it's easy but difficult things that you can do to figure out if you want to move into vulnerable leadership is when you're faced with a situation that, and it could be retrospective, but when you're faced with a situation where you feel yourself start to wall up, right? And you're like, oh, no, got to be the perfect leader. I've got to get this all worked out. When you start to feel that, I want you to take a second and kind of feel it into your being. So however that is for you. So if you're the type of person who just kind of gets like a gut feeling, or maybe it's just a thought that comes in, whatever that is. But like for me, I can feel it in my body when I start to put up like that wall of non-vulnerability and that wall of protection. And what I can do then is go, okay, wait, why am I so tense and uptight right now? And I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, ooh, the neck's disappearing and the shoulders are going up because everything just feels so constricted.
Thanks.
And why?
Yeah.
Why am I feeling that way? Okay, well, I'm feeling this way because this person just asked me a question. I don't know the answers. They expect me to know the answers, especially in the position that I'm in. And I don't want to be perceived as someone who doesn't know what they're doing or someone who's not qualified for this job. And now I'm in the spot and I'm just going to have to like protect myself and just, there's the wall,
Yeah.
right? And so when I feel that I'm starting to get that intensity around my body in a situation, I can go, okay. And mentally, because like this is all real time. So I'm feeling it and I'm like, okay, I don't want to be like this. So I can just kind of drop my shoulders, relax, take kind of a breath and say, that is an excellent question. And I'm not quite sure, but we can definitely figure it out. And would you be willing to help me figure it out? Because I want to know kind of the background of how we got here. So full situation and context, so we can provide the best answer and solution. And that is in its essence vulnerable leadership. But for one core takeaway, when you start to feel those walls go up, however your body or your mentality or your emotions react to that, pay attention and go, oh, there's the trigger signal.
That's
That means
it.
that I'm not being vulnerable right now. How can I step into vulnerability in this moment and still be a solid leader and be there for my team?
I
And
have to say, yeah, it actually goes back to where we started, being aware.
yes,
Being aware of the cues in terms of how you feel, how your body responds, the thoughts that are going on inside your head. And I think it might not come naturally to some people because they are so used to old ways of responding. But it takes a bit of time. It takes a little bit of awareness, actually being aware of how you feel and how your body responds, and making a conscious decision to
absolutely.
respond differently. That instead of, okay, you can feel the tension and it's almost like you just want to say anything just to give an answer, just to
Yes,
show that you are a leader. Make a conscious decision to actually admit that, oh, okay, yeah, that's an interesting question, but I actually don't know. So let's try to figure it out and see what what we can do together. But it does take a conscious decision to do that. And just that awareness of how you feel, how your body responds, and how you respond, sorry, how you respond ultimately when you're being triggered in that way. So I have to say, this is just a really interesting conversation that we've got today, Taylor. If people want to learn more about this and if they want to connect with you or find out more about what you do and how they can work with you, actually, where
Yeah.
can they find you?
Yeah, so I have a website, happinessabound.com, but I also have a Facebook group of my own called Happiness Abounders, free to join. So feel free to hop on over there. And also, I'm on Instagram, obviously Facebook. I have a YouTube channel, and then I also have a Happiness Abound
Podcast.
podcast. Yes. So you can find me pretty much anywhere that you type in Happiness Abound, and I'll be there.
I'll put the details in the description, all the links, so people can actually visit that and check it out. And certainly for me, I find this concept of vulnerable leadership so interesting. I think for me, I've read about Brene Brown and all that, but when it comes to vulnerable leadership, I think this is still something that I have to learn a bit more and practice more because yeah, for leaders, it's almost like I need to have the answers. I need to appear in a certain way because I'm the leader and,
Yeah.
people are looking to me. And you forget that you are human, that you don't have the answer to everything, that you also have insecurities. But I know that you still have to deliver, but there is a balance and there's a way for us to connect with our members of staff, to connect with our team, to try to be on the same boat, learn together, work together, and get on with what you have to do and recognize that yeah, it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes. So
Absolutely.
it's really good that we've had this conversation, Taylor, and certainly for our viewers today and listeners today, I hope that they've taken some new insights about this fascinating topic. So thanks again, Taylor, and thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch up again next time for another purposeful conversations with me, Emmy, here in the PAMI Code Facebook group. Until then, take care and bye for now. Bye. Bye.